An Athenian politician and military commander during the Persian Invasions, Themistocles is famed as one of the chief saviours of Greece from the Persian Empire. Here we'll examine his life, as detailed by the Roman historian Plutarch, Herodotus, who many consider the father of history, the historian Tom Holland in his book Persian Fire, and Thucydides. In childhood, Themistocles wasn't a particularly gifted student in school. Instead, he would spend most of his time preparing for a political life. Instead of going out and playing with his friends, Themistocles would prefer to sit at home writing speeches. One of his teachers is believed to have said to him, quote, "My boy, you will be nothing insignificant, but definitely something great, either for good or evil." In Athens, Themistocles previously would have had no access to power or a public life, due to not coming from a family with any obvious political degree. The new system of government, however, opened up many opportunities for him. This system of government is described in a lot more detail in our last video, where we discuss Solon the lawgiver and his reformations to Athens and Athenian law. Themistocles grew his political fame by making himself a man of the people. To quote Tom Holland, he wooed the poor, and they, not used to being courted, dully loved him back, touring the taverns, the markets, the docks, canvassing where no politician had thought to canvass before, making sure never to forget a single voter's name. Themistocles had set his eyes on a radical new constituency. End quote. The workings of his mind, infinitely mobile and serpentine, would ultimately become a thing of wonder to his fellow citizens. End of alarm. Not a dark art required of the politician under the Athenians' new form of government, but Themistocles showed himself its master. He could infight, he could network, he could spin, and above all, and most crucially, he knew how to make himself visible. So on the back of his popularity, Themistocles was elected Archon, or leader of Athens, in 493 BC, at 30 years of age. So while Themistocles no doubt desired the best for Athens and the Athenians, many of his actions also seem to have been made in his self-interest, so he appears to have been a little bit corrupt, and was known not to shy away from a bribe either. However, Themistocles, with his popularity firmly established amongst the common people, became the most influential politician in Athens. But the nobles and the more blue-blooded Athenians united behind the man who would become Themistocles' greatest rival, Aristides. Aristides marketed himself as Themistocles' opposite, virtuous, honest, and incorruptible, and his followers called him Aristides the Just. Themistocles is believed to have been a commander in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, which is also known as the First Persian Invasion, where the Greek hoplites defeated the Persians on the Marathon beachfront. The Athenians were aware that Persia's interest in Greece hadn't ended with the Battle of Marathon, and Xerxes, the king of the Persian Empire at the time, had continued to prepare for a second invasion of Greece. So Themistocles realised that for the Athenians to survive this much larger Persian invasion, they needed a strong navy, one that could hope to face up to the Persians. In 483 BC, the Athenians discovered a rich new type of silver in their mines, and Themistocles proposed that silver should be used to build a new fleet of 200 triremes. However, Aristides opposed him, and instead insisted it be distributed amongst the Athenian citizens. In Themistocles' argument, he avoided mentioning the Persian invasion as to why they should build the fleet, because the Athenians at the time saw Persia as too far away and distant a threat. So instead, he focused their attention on Aegina. At the time, Athens was involved in a long-running war with Aegina, and building a fleet would allow the Athenians to finally defeat them at sea. That way, Themistocles was able to convince the Athenians to build the fleet. So tensions began to build between Themistocles and Aristides, and so much so that Themistocles ostracized or banished Aristides from Athens. So with Aristides in exile, Themistocles had become the most prominent politician in Athens. And with the Persians finally on the move towards Greece, a congress of Greek city-states was held, and during which 30 or so states agreed to ally themselves for the oncoming Persian invasion. In the Congress, it was decided that the Spartans were to command the land forces. Now Themistocles tried to take command of the naval forces since the Athenians had the most dominant sea power in Greece, but the other naval powers in Greece didn't want the Athenians to have the command of the navy. so Themistocles backed down and allowed the Spartans to take command of the fleet as well. And when the Persians eventually invaded the second time, the Greek navy attempted to block the Persians by blocking the Straits of Artemisium. But in order to do this, every able-bodied Athenian male would be required to man the ships. But in order to do so, the Athenians would have to abandon Athens. Persuading the Athenians to do this is famed as one of the highlights of Themistocles' career. To again quote Tom Holland, "What precise heights of oratory he attained, what stirring and memorable phrases he pronounced, we have no way of knowing. Only by the effect it had on the assembly can we gauge what surely must have been its electric and vivifying quality. For Themistocles' audacious proposals, when put to the vote, were ratified. The Athenian people, facing the gravest moment of peril in their history, committed themselves once and for all to the alien element of the sea, and put their faith in a man whose ambitions many had long profoundly dreaded. So when the Persian fleet finally arrived, the Greek navy was able to stand their ground against a larger Persian fleet. However, they were still suffering significant losses, and after the news of the defeat at the corresponding battle at Thermopylae, there wasn't much point in Themistocles' ships being at Artemisium anymore, so they left to the island of Salamis. It's said that Themistocles left messages at every place where the Persian fleet might dock, asking the Greek city-states who were fighting with the Persians to defect, or at least fight badly. Themistocles at least intended that Xerxes would begin to suspect the Greeks, thereby sowing dissension in the Persian ranks. Themistocles then convinced the Greek fleet to fight in the Straits of Salamis, learning from the Battle of Artemisium that fighting in close conditions would work to the Greeks' advantage. Eventually the Persian navy had arrived off the coast of Salamis, and the Greek navy remained in the straits. Themistocles sent a servant to Xerxes with a message that Themistocles was on the king's side and prefers that Xerxes and the Persians defeat the Hellenes. Themistocles' servant claimed that the Greek commanders were fighting with each other and that they were planning to evacuate that very night, and to gain victory, all the Persians needed to do was to block the straits. In doing this, Themistocles was trying to lure the Persian fleet into the Straits of Salamis, and Xerxes evidently took the bait. And the Persian fleet went into the straits, only to find the Greek navy ready and waiting. Themistocles also ordered that all ostracized Athenians be recalled from exile, so that Athens would be united against the Persians. Also meaning that Themistocles' greatest rival, Aristides, would return. Aristides told Themistocles that the Persian fleet had encircled the Greek, which greatly pleased him, as now he knew that the Persians had walked into his trap. Themistocles then delivered a speech to the Hellenes before they engaged in battle with the Persians, and as Themistocles thought, the narrow straits of Salamis crippled the much larger Persian navy, and the Greeks defeated the Persians. Since Themistocles was the one who originally advocated for the Athenians to strengthen their navy, and his strategies succeeded in the Battle of Salamis, Plutarch says, quote, that Themistocles is thought to have been the man most instrumental in achieving the salvation of Hellas. A prize of valour was to be awarded for the man who fought the bravest during the battles. So the Greeks took a ballot and voted for who they thought fought the bravest. And although each man voted himself first, all voted Themistocles second. So the Greeks awarded Themistocles, quote, for his wisdom and cleverness. So, in 479 BC, in the aftermath of the invasion, the Athenians first set out to rebuild their city under the guidance of Themistocles. They wanted to fortify Athens, but the Spartans objected to this, saying that no place north of the isthmus should be left that the Persians could use as a fortress. Themistocles urged the Athenians to build the fortifications anyway, and as quickly as possible. He then went to Sparta, and there he assured them that no building of fortifications was going on, and urged them to even send emissaries to Athens to see for themselves. And by the time the Spartan ambassadors arrived, the Athenians had already finished building, and then detained the Spartan ambassadors when they complained about the fortifications. By delaying in this manner, Themistocles gave the Athenians enough time to fortify the city. This cunning trick by Themistocles, however, would be the beginning of the Spartan mistrust of him, which, as we'll see now, returns to haunt him. Something which unfortunately seemed to be a common theme in Athens, Themistocles' peers became jealous of his success, and there was a good chance they were tired of his boasting and arrogance too. The Spartans actively worked against him, trying to promote Cimon, the son of Mithridates, as a political rival to Themistocles. Eventually, in roughly 471 BC, Themistocles was ostracized from Athens. Themistocles then fled from Greece, never to return. Surprisingly, Themistocles was welcomed by Artaxerxes in Persia, Xerxes' son and now the Persian king. Plutarch says that Artaxerxes was elated that such a famous and esteemed man had come to see him, and Artaxerxes made Themistocles governor of Magnesia. To show you a little bit about the character of Themistocles, to quote Plutarch, whenever in late life he found himself at any cultivated or elegant social gathering, and was sneered at by men who regarded themselves as better educated, he could only defend himself rather arrogantly, by saying that he had never learned how to tune a lyre or play a harp, but that he knew how to take a small or insignificant city in hand and raise it to glory and greatness. Themistocles died at Magnesia in 459 BC, at age 65, and according to Thucydides, from natural causes. Thucydides writes, Themistocles was a man who exhibited the most indubitable signs of genius. Indeed, in this particular he has claim to our admiration quite extraordinary and unparalleled. Although maybe too ambitious for glory and power, Themistocles was certainly one of the most important and colourful characters in ancient Greece. Okay, thank you all for listening. If you've got any feedback or comments you'd like to make, please leave a comment and let me know what you thought. Alright, thank you all.